The house smells faintly of roses and old wood polish. Sunlight streams through the lace curtains, settling on the china tea set I arranged so carefully the night before. I smooth a wrinkle on my blouse for what must be the 10th time, my hands trembling ever so slightly. Today I am 76. I told myself I didn't need a celebration. But deep down, a small part of me hoped Rachel would arrive smiling, maybe with flowers or a card. Perhaps even my grandson would come bounding in with a laugh and hug like he used to when he was younger. When the doorbell rings, my heart gives a hopeful leap. I glance in the mirror by the hall, quickly straightening my silver bun and dabbing at the corners of my eyes. The door swings open to Rachel, standing stiffly in a tailored coat, her eyes unreadable. "Rachel," I begin, smiling. "You came." The slap comes so fast I don't see it coming. My head jerks to the side, my cheek stinging as the sound echoes in the hall. "You're unfaithful," Rachel spits, her voice trembling with anger. "I know everything. Don't pretend anymore." I stare at my daughter, unable to form words. Unfaithful. To whom? To what? Before I can speak, Rachel thrusts a small box into my hands. "This belonged to Dad. I found it in the attic. Open it. You'll see." And with that, she turns on her heel and strides down the steps, leaving me clutching the box like a bomb about to go off. My hands shake as I set it on the table. The box is old, its velvet covering worn thin. A brass latch holds it shut. For a moment, I simply stare at it, my mind churning with questions. What could be inside? What had Rachel found? Finally, I release the latch. The box creaks open. Inside lies a single brass key and a folded note in my late husband's handwriting. "Margaret, if you're reading this, the truth has caught up with us. Go to the study. Open the safe. It's time." My breath catches in my throat. The safe. I haven't opened it in decades. The birthday tea sits forgotten as I stand, the note trembling in my hand. The truth. Whatever it is, I will face it now. And this time I won't let anyone take my dignity again. I stood there in my quiet kitchen, clutching my late husband's note as though it were the only thing keeping me upright. The china tea set I had prepared that morning sat untouched on the table. The sugar cubes I had arranged so precisely now looked foolishly optimistic. I remembered the sound of Rachel's heels clicking angrily down the steps, the way her words still hung in the air like smoke from a fire. Unfaithful. She had spat it like a curse, and I felt it lodge in my chest like a thorn. The key felt heavy in my palm, far heavier than its size could explain. It was brass, worn smooth with age, with an engraving I hadn't noticed in decades. T.W. Thomas Whitmore, my husband's initials. I stared at the hallway leading to the study. The air seemed to shift, colder, heavier. That room had been locked for so many years. After Thomas died, I couldn't bear to enter. It was his sanctuary, his fortress. Now, it had become a vault for secrets I never wanted to unearth. But the box, the note, Rachel's slap, it all pointed in one direction, the study. I moved slowly, my steps echoing on the hardwood floor. Memories flashed with each creak of the old house. Thomas laughing in his armchair, Rachel running barefoot down the hall as a child, me standing in the doorway with a cup of tea and a smile I thought would last forever. The study door loomed ahead. I hadn't touched the brass knob in nearly 30 years. My hand shook as I pressed the key into the lock. The tumblers turned with a reluctant groan. The scent of old leather, pipe smoke, and dust greeted me like a long-buried ghost. The room looked untouched, yet there was an oppressive stillness, as if the walls themselves held their breath. I spotted the safe behind the oil painting of a sailboat. With a grunt, I slid the heavy frame aside. The safe door was as familiar as the lines of my own hand, and yet I felt like an intruder. I slipped the key into the lock, turned with a soft click. Inside were stacks of envelopes, bundles of documents tied with red string, and a leather-bound journal with my name embossed in gold. Margaret Whitmore. My fingers trembled as I lifted the journal. Its cover was cracked with age. I opened to the first page. To my dearest Margaret. If you are reading this, then the lies we built our lives upon have started to unravel. This is my confession and my apology. I never wanted you to know, but you deserve the truth. My breath caught in my throat. I turned the page, my heart pounding like a drum. In 1974, I made a choice that changed everything. I sank into Thomas's old leather chair, clutching the journal as though it were a lifeline. Outside, a storm was brewing. The first drops of rain tapped against the windows. I began to read, and I knew my life would never be the same again. The year is etched into my mind like a scar. The year I first doubted my husband. The year the first thread unraveled in the tapestry of our marriage. I had been 26 then, young, foolishly believing that love could shield us from anything. Thomas was 34, charming, ambitious, and already consumed by his law practice. I used to wait for him to come home in the evenings, listening for the sound of his car pulling into the driveway, clutching Rachel, then only two, in my arms. But one night the car never came. Hours passed. Midnight struck. I sat alone in the living room with a cold cup of tea in my hands. The house felt cavernous and empty, every creak in the floorboards sounding like an accusation. When the phone rang, I nearly dropped the teacup. Margaret! Thomas's voice, low and distant. Where are you? It's past midnight. I'm at the office, he said quickly. I lost track of time. But I heard it, the faint sound of laughter in the background. A woman's laughter. I wanted to ask. I wanted to scream. But I said nothing. Not then. Now, sitting in his old study decades later, I read his confession with a strange sense of calm. I never meant to hurt you, Margaret. But I was weak. There was another woman. It lasted only a year, but the guilt followed me to my grave. I thought I had buried it. I thought you would never know. But Rachel, she must have found something I hid. She deserves none of this anger. It was my sin, not hers. I felt the air leave my lungs. So it was true. Thomas had betrayed me. And somehow Rachel had unearthed the past. The next pages hinted at something darker. A business partner embezzled funds, a man named Jonathan Hale. The name rang a distant bell. Thomas's journal spoke of threats, of secrets locked away for decades. And I was holding the key. I closed the journal and stared at the safe. More envelopes sat waiting. More truths. But I wasn't sure I was ready to open them. I rose from the chair and drew the curtains. The storm outside raged louder now, wind battering the windows like angry fists. In the reflection of the glass, I saw not a fragile old woman but someone harder, sharper. I whispered to my reflection, if they want a fight, they'll get one. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. The journal sat heavy on the nightstand, its presence like a second heartbeat in the room. Every time I closed my eyes, Thomas's words echoed. Rachel, she must have found something I hid. What had she found? And more importantly, what else was locked away in that safe? By dawn, the storm had passed. But I felt another kind of storm brewing inside me. I made tea and stared out at the old oak tree in the yard, its bare branches clawing at the sky. For years I had tried to bury my doubts, my pain, under layers of routine and silence. But now the past had clawed its way back, and I could no longer pretend. I returned to the study. The safe was still ajar, like a mouth waiting to speak. My fingers hovered over the next envelope, tied with red string and labeled in Thomas's neat hand. Hale, confidential. I pulled it out and unfolded the documents. Letters, legal forms, photos. One photo made my stomach twist. Thomas and Jonathan Hale shaking hands outside a courthouse, both smiling, but there was tension in their eyes. The letters spoke of embezzlement, threats of exposure, hush money. I had always known Thomas's law firm was successful, but I hadn't realized at what cost. Then, at the bottom of the stack, a single handwritten note. If anything happens to me, it will be Hale. Protect Rachel. I clutched the paper until my knuckles whitened. Was Thomas's death really an accident? Or was it something darker? My pulse quickened. Rachel didn't know the full story. Not yet. But if Hale's family still held influence in Savannah, she might be in danger without realizing it. I reached for my phone but stopped. Who could I even trust with this? The reflection in the glass cabinet caught my eye again. The woman staring back was not the passive wife she used to be. She was a mother, a survivor. I will protect her, I whispered, even if it meant dragging the past into the light. The next morning I found myself staring at the box again. That small, unassuming velvet-covered box had been the catalyst of everything. It sat on the corner of the kitchen table, surrounded by sunlight pouring through the window. It almost looked innocent now. But I knew better. I brewed a fresh pot of tea, my hands steady now. Last night's fear had been replaced with something else, a quiet determination. I wasn't the same woman Rachel had slapped 2 days ago. Something had shifted. I gathered the rest of the envelopes from the safe and spread them across the table like pieces of a puzzle. Each one bore Thomas's handwriting, labeled with names and dates that sent shivers down my spine. L. Whitmore Trust. Whitmore, private. The last one stopped me cold. Name. I untied the red string and unfolded the contents. Inside was a stack of letters addressed to me, never sent. Pages and pages of Thomas's careful handwriting. Margaret, I don't expect forgiveness. But I need you to know the truth before it's too late. Hale isn't the only threat. There are others, people I once called friends. The trust one built isn't safe anymore. And neither are you or Rachel if they discover what I've hidden. I leaned back in the chair, the words sinking in like stones in water. This wasn't just about infidelity or even embezzlement. This was bigger. The trust fund, the assets Thomas had left behind, was all in danger. And Rachel? She thought she hated me for what she believed I did. She had no idea the real danger came from outside our family. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts. David Whitmore, Thomas's cousin and our family lawyer. I hesitated. Could I trust him? Or was he one of the people Thomas had warned me about? Well, I couldn't risk it. I would have to do this alone. I locked the documents back in the safe, tucking the key into my cardigan pocket. My reflection in the microwave door caught my eye. Silver hair pulled tight, face lined but unbroken. There was fire there now. I wasn't just going to survive. I was going to win. For Thomas. For Rachel. For me. The day felt heavier than usual, like the air itself was charged with a storm I couldn't see. I stood at the kitchen sink, staring out the window at the garden Thomas once tended so carefully. The roses were overgrown now, their wild beauty a contrast to the neat rows he had always kept. Like my life, wild, untamed, threatening to burst beyond control. I knew sitting idle wasn't an option. The documents in the safe weren't just pieces of paper. They were weapons, and if I didn't use them, someone else would. The first step was to secure the assets. Thomas's journal mentioned an offshore account in my name. It was meant to protect Rachel and me from Hale, in case the unthinkable happened. I hadn't even known it existed. I dusted off my old laptop, feeling strangely like a spy as I booted it up. The account details were scribbled in the back of the journal, a string of numbers and a password I recognized instantly. The name of our first dog, Clover. Logging in felt like stepping into another world. The balance displayed made my stomach flip. More money than I had imagined. Enough to rebuild, enough to fight back. But it wasn't just about money. It was about control. I booked an appointment at the bank, under the guise of updating my contact information. No one could suspect my real intentions. Not yet. As I hung up, my phone buzzed with a message from Rachel. You're lucky I haven't told the world what you did. But I will if you don't sign over the house. My hands didn't shake. Not anymore. Come by tomorrow, I typed back. We'll talk. But what I didn't add was that it wouldn't be the kind of talk she expected. I glanced again at my reflection. The woman staring back wasn't the frail old mother Rachel thought she could bully. No, this woman was ready for battle. And I intended to win. Barely slept. By dawn, I was already in the kitchen, watching the sun crawl over the horizon. The air felt thick, like it held its breath for the coming confrontation. Rachel would be here soon. I laid out the breakfast table not for her, but for me. A ritual to remind myself of my strength. Tea steeping in a porcelain pot, toast with a thin layer of butter, and a single vase with a rose from the wild garden Thomas once loved. The doorbell rang at precisely 9. Rachel walked in without waiting for me to invite her. She was still the same, sharp heels, sharper tongue. She stood with her arms folded, her eyes scanning the house like a predator assessing its prey. "I don't have much time," she said flatly. "Let's get this over with." I motioned to the chair opposite me. "Sit." She didn't. Instead, she pulled papers from her leather bag and slapped them on the table. "Sign these. You'll transfer the house to me. And I'll keep your dirty secrets between us." I sipped my tea slowly, letting the silence stretch. Her confidence wavered ever so slightly. "You think you know my secrets?" "Yes. I know enough." I set my cup down gently. "You know only what your father wanted you to know. But there's more, Rachel. So much more. And you're standing on quicksand." Her brows furrowed. "What are you talking about?" I leaned forward, my voice calm but cutting. "Hale. The trust. The danger your father shielded us from. You think taking this house is power. You have no idea what power looks like." Rachel faltered for a moment, her facade cracking. "I'll fight you," she hissed. "I'll drag your name through the mud." "I welcome the fight," I said, rising to my full height. "But be prepared, Rachel. Because if you come for me, you'll have to face the truth. And the truth doesn't care about your lies." Her eyes darted to the papers. For the first time she looked uncertain. I walked her to the door, each step echoing like a drumbeat of finality. "Think carefully before you come back," I said. "The next time I won't be so gentle." She left without a word, her heels clicking furiously down the path. I closed the door behind her and exhaled. For the first time in years I felt like myself again. The lines had been drawn, and there would be no going back. The house was quiet again, but it wasn't the comforting kind of silence I had once cherished. This was the silence of a battlefield just before the first shots are fired. I watched Rachel's car disappear down the street, her anger trailing behind her like the exhaust fumes from her engine. I knew she wouldn't let this go. She was her father's daughter, proud, stubborn, and reckless when cornered. I returned to the study, my sanctuary and now my war room. I spread out Thomas's journal and the documents on the oak desk. Every page told a story of betrayal, greed, and threats buried beneath decades of Southern charm and polite smiles. The phone buzzed. Message. "Margaret, this is David Whitmore. I've heard whispers about Rachel's intentions. Please call me. We need to talk before things escalate." David. Thomas's cousin. My mind flashed back to Thomas's note warning me not to trust anyone, not even family. But David had always been kind, protective even. Still, could kindness mask ambition? I ignored the message for now. Too much was at stake to make a wrong move. Focused on the journal again. One entry caught my eye. "Hale knows. He threatened me last week. If he comes for you or Rachel after I'm gone, don't face him alone. Leverage the trust. It's your shield." The trust. My shield. But only if I understood how to use it. A knock at the door startled me. Not the front door, the back. I peered through the curtains. A man in his 60s stood there, his fedora low over his brow. Recognition jolted me. "Jonathan Hale," I whispered. He smiled faintly when I opened the door. "Margaret Whitmore. It's been a long time. What do you want?" asked, gripping the doorframe. "To talk," he said calmly. "Before this gets ugly." I didn't invite him in. "Talk then." He tipped his hat. "Your husband owed me, Margaret. And that debt didn't die with him. Rachel's been cooperative. But you're going to be a problem, aren't you?" I met his gaze, unflinching. I've been underestimated my entire life, Mr. Hale. You won't make that mistake and survive it. His smile vanished. This isn't a game. Sell me the house. Sign over the trust. Or I'll bury your family's name so deep Savannah won't remember it. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Try me. Hale's eyes narrowed. You've got spirit, Margaret. But spirit doesn't win wars. Power does. He turned and walked away, his warning hanging in the air. I locked the door behind him and returned to the study. My hands didn't tremble this time. The storm was gathering, and I was ready to meet it head-on. This was no longer about survival. It was about victory. I woke before dawn, my mind already racing. The house was still cloaked in the deep hush of early morning, but I could feel it, the subtle shift in the air. Something had begun. I dressed with deliberate care, pulling on a tailored navy coat Thomas had once loved on me. I tied my silver hair back tighter than usual. Today I needed to look like a woman not to be trifled with. My first move was to secure the trust. The offshore account Thomas had left instructions for was my strongest asset, and I would not let Hale or Rachel snatch it away. At the bank, I kept my expression serene as I signed document after document, transferring key holdings into a new account under my sole authority. The clerk glanced at me curiously as he handed over the confirmation papers. Big changes, he remarked. Yes, I said. Necessary ones. By the time I stepped back into the chill of the Savannah morning, I felt lighter. But this was only the beginning. I drove to a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town where I knew David Whitmore would be waiting. I had ignored his earlier message, but now I needed to gauge whether he was friend or foe. Margaret! He greeted me warmly, standing as I approached. His eyes held concern, but I knew better than to take that at face value. David, I replied, sliding into the booth opposite him. He leaned forward. Rachel is in deep with Hale. They're trying to force you out before you can act. You're in danger. I'm aware, I said evenly. That's why I'm here. He blinked. You want my help? No, I said, letting the word hang between us. I want your information. I need to know how far Hale's reach goes, and I need to know now. David hesitated, then nodded slowly. You've changed, Margaret. I can see it. I've been pushed too far, I said softly. I'm not backing down. Not this time. As I left the cafe, I felt a sense of purpose solidify in my chest. Rachel and Hale thought they had cornered me. They were wrong. They hadn't yet seen what I was capable of. This was the first strike. And I wouldn't stop until I had one. The phone call came just after midnight. I had been sitting in Thomas's old leather chair, staring at the journal in my lap, when the shrill ring pierced the silence. Margaret Whitmore? A male voice asked. This is Deputy Ellis from the Savannah Police Department. I'm afraid there's been an incident involving your daughter. My heart stopped. Rachel. What happened? She's fine physically, ma'am, Ellis said quickly. But her husband, Mark Hale, was arrested tonight. Financial crimes, fraud, and suspected connections to organized theft rings. I closed my eyes and let out a slow breath. The first crack in their armor. Thank you, Deputy, I said calmly. Please tell Rachel she can come home if she needs to. But I knew Rachel would not come. Pride and fear would keep her away. By morning, the news had hit the papers. Prominent Savannah businessman arrested. Ties to Hale family exposed. Jonathan Hale's face was splashed across every headline. His carefully cultivated image of power and respectability was crumbling. I stood in the kitchen, pouring tea as my phone buzzed non-stop with calls I didn't answer. Rachel's name finally appeared on the screen. I let it ring twice before picking up. Mother! Her voice cracked unsteady. You knew. Didn't you? I warned you, I said softly. But you didn't listen. Everything's falling apart. They're freezing our accounts. The house, the cars. It's all gone. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Rachel, this is your chance to step away. Start fresh. But if you stay tethered to Hale, He'll drag you down with him. There was a long pause. You sound different. Stronger. I am, I replied. I had to be. For the first time in weeks, I felt the scales tipping in my favor. But I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. Jonathan Hale was wounded. And a wounded predator was even more dangerous. The following days were eerily calm. I kept the curtains drawn, not out of fear but to focus. I knew Hale wouldn't let this humiliation stand. He had lost too much too quickly, and men like him never go down quietly. I was sipping my evening tea when a black sedan slowed in front of my house. My heartbeat quickened, but I didn't move from my seat by the window. A figure stepped out, a man in a dark coat, broad-shouldered, moving with deliberate precision. It wasn't Hale, but I knew instinctively he had sent this man. A knock came at the door, sharp and insistent. I opened it, meeting the stranger's cold stare. Mrs. Whitmore, Mr. Hale requests a meeting. Tonight. I let out a faint smile. Tell him I don't take requests. You should reconsider. I already have. The man's jaw tightened before he turned and walked back to the car. The message was clear. Hale was desperate. And desperate men made mistakes. I spent the night preparing. I called David Whitmore and gave him clear instructions. Release the documents from the safe to the press if anything happened to me. No hesitation, David. Burn them all if you must, but don't let Hale win. You've changed, Margaret, he said quietly. This isn't the woman I remember. She's been gone a long time, I said. But she's back now. The next day, Hale himself appeared on my doorstep. No bodyguards. No charm. Just a man unraveling. Margaret, he greeted, his voice tight. We need to settle this. You've won a few battles, but the war isn't over. You're right, I said evenly. It isn't. His eyes narrowed. I could ruin Rachel. Do you want that? You already have, I replied. But she's stronger than you know. And so am I. Hale's mask cracked, and for the first time I saw fear in his eyes. You're making a mistake. No, I said softly. I'm correcting one. He turned and left, his shoulders slumped. I watched him go, knowing I had just witnessed the end of a predator's reign. But I also knew predators don't die. They retreat and wait for another chance. And I would be ready. The morning after Hale's retreat, the world seemed unnaturally still. The birds chirped as they always had. The sunlight stretched lazily across my kitchen table, but beneath it all was a new undercurrent of calm. Not the calm of surrender. No, this was the quiet of victory. I stood at the window, watching the neighborhood wake. For the first time in months, I didn't feel the weight of Hale's shadow looming over me. His empire was crumbling, and Rachel had sent a single message late last night. I don't know how to fix this. I'm sorry. It wasn't enough to erase what she'd done, but it was a beginning. And beginnings were powerful things. I spent the day making calls, tying off loose ends. The lawyers confirmed the trust was safe, the offshore accounts secured. David reported that Hale's remaining allies had started to abandon him one by one. Margaret, David said almost with reverence. You've won. Savannah is already whispering your name, not as a victim but as a force. Good, I replied softly. Let them whisper. But I didn't do this for their respect. That evening, I took a walk through the overgrown garden. I ran my fingers along the wild roses, feeling their thorns bite gently into my skin. They reminded me of myself, beautiful still but no longer defenseless. At the far end of the path, I saw a figure standing. Rachel. Her hair was loose, her face pale and drawn. Mother, she said. Just one word, heavy with regret. Rachel. I didn't move closer. Waited. Tears welled in her eyes. I was wrong. About you. About everything. Can you ever forgive me? I looked past her to the fading sunset. Forgiveness wasn't easy. Not after betrayal so deep. But this wasn't about easy. It was about choice. Forgiveness, I said slowly, is not a gift. It's a decision. And it takes time. Are you willing to wait? She nodded, her shoulders trembling. I'll wait as long as it takes. I reached out, brushing her arm lightly. Then we'll start from here. One step at a time. For the first time in a long while, my heart felt light. The fight was over. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was peace. And this time I had claimed it for myself. The days after our confrontation with Hale blurred together in a quiet rhythm. For the first time in years, my home felt like a sanctuary again. The air was no longer thick with fear or tension. It was alive with possibility. Rachel came to visit more often. She no longer arrived with demands or accusations, but with tentative smiles and small gestures of reconciliation. She helped me trim the wild roses, swept the old study, and even offered to cook dinner, a task she'd never enjoyed before. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch sipping sweet tea, Rachel spoke. Mother, why didn't you ever tell me about the trust? About Hale? I let the warm breeze fill the silence before answering. Because I wanted you to have a life free of shadows. But perhaps that was my mistake. I thought shielding you from the truth would protect you. I see now it only made you vulnerable. She nodded, eyes distant. I didn't understand then. But I think I do now. I placed a hand over hers. You're stronger than you believe, Rachel. You always were. Together we began to make plans. Not just to repair what had been broken but to build something new. The Whitmore Trust, once a fortress for secrets, would become a foundation for second chances. We decided to fund scholarships for women rebuilding their lives, start community programs, and restore Thomas's old library in his memory. This isn't just about our name, I said. It's about giving others the tools to reclaim their own legacies. Rachel smiled, a real, unguarded smile I hadn't seen since she was a girl. It's a beautiful idea. As the sun set over the garden, I felt a weight lift from my chest. The fight was over, but my purpose was not. I had survived betrayal, threats, and loss. Now I was rebuilding, not for appearances, not for revenge, but for the future. For Rachel. For myself. For every woman who'd ever been underestimated. Spring arrived with gentle warmth, coaxing the wild roses in my garden to bloom once again. I watched them sway in the breeze, their petals a vivid reminder that even after harsh winters, beauty could return. Rachel sat beside me on the porch swing, her hand resting lightly over mine. There was no trace of the anger or bitterness that had once hardened her features. Instead, there was peace, a fragile, precious peace we had both fought for. Do you ever think about him? She asked softly. About Dad. I let out a long breath. Every day. But now it's different. The hurt is still there, but so is gratitude. He left us with pain, yes, but also with strength we didn't know we had. She nodded. I see that now. And I'm sorry for what I said to you. For what I did. I looked at her and saw not the rebellious daughter who once accused me, but a woman who had endured her own trials and emerged wiser. I forgive you, Rachel. I think I forgave you the moment you stood back in this garden. Together we watched as the first visitors arrived at the Whitmore Community Library, a place reborn from ashes. The laughter of children echoed from the courtyard where Thomas's name was etched into the marble plaque. This is what he would have wanted, Rachel said. It's what we want too, I replied. In the distance, I saw young women, mothers, and even a few elderly widows, each walking through the library doors with hope in their eyes. Our legacy was no longer built on secrets and fear. It was built on dignity and renewal. For years, I had been silenced by shame and doubt. But no longer. Now I spoke in actions. In gardens reborn. In lives rebuilt. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in gold and crimson, I whispered to myself the words that had carried me through every dark night. They underestimated me. And now they never will again. Rachel squeezed my hand gently. You're the strongest woman I know, Mother. I smiled, my heart full. And you're becoming the strongest woman I know. The circle was complete. And we were free.